Margaret Thaler Singer stands alone in her extraordinary knowledge of the psychology of cults. Over decades, she has brought to the subject a rare combination of professional skill and personal courage. Singer recognizes the complexity of the cult phenomenon. She is aware of a continuum from relatively innocuous, if one-sided efforts at persuasion at one end to systematic thought reform procedures on the other. She is also aware that psychological manipulation is the heart of the matter, with or without the use of physical violence. At the same time, she knows well that the more general issue of totalistic groups transcends any professional discipline and has to do with larger social and historical forces. I have been preoccupied with the questions of totalism from the time of my study of Chinese thought reform in the mid-1950s, and came full circle in returning to the subject when studying Nazi doctors in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Totalism is likely to emerge during periods of historical or psycho-historical dislocation, in which there is a breakdown of the symbols and structures that guide the human life cycle. Contributing to this dislocation is the mass media revolution, which creates the remarkable possibility of any one of us at any moment having access to any image or idea originating anywhere in the contemporary world or from any cultural moment of the entire human past. Still, another powerful influence furthers our dislocation: awareness of our late 20th century technological capability to annihilate ourselves as a species, and to do so with neither purpose nor redemption. What results from these historical forces are widespread feelings that we are losing our psychological moorings. We feel ourselves buffeted about by unmanageable currents and radical social uncertainties. A major response to this confusion has been the contemporary worldwide epidemic of fundamentalism. That movement, broadly understood, derives from a fear of the loss of fundamentals, giving rise to a demand for absolute dogma and a monolithic self, all rendered sacred in the name of a past of perfect harmony that never was. What we call cults represent an important expression of fundamentalism. One person's cult, of course, is another's religion, or, for that matter, political or commercial organization. One must make careful distinctions, as Singer cautions us, and judge each group by its own behavior. I define cults in terms of a cluster of groups with certain characteristics. First, all cults have a charismatic leader, who himself or herself increasingly becomes the object of worship, and in many cases, the dispenser of immortality. Spiritual ideas of a general kind give way to this deification of the leader. Second, in cults, there occurs a series of psychological processes that can be associated with what has been called coercive persuasion or thought reform, as described in some detail in this book. And third, there's a pattern of manipulation and exploitation from above by leaders and ruling coteries. The idealism from below on the part of supplicants, and idealism from below on the part of supplicants and recruits. But neither fundamentalism nor cult formation should be seen as the last word. There is an alternative, much more hopeful pattern that arises from the same historical soil. I have in mind a tendency toward a more open and flexible self that can be in tune with the larger uncertainties that surround us. I have named it the protean self, after Proteus, the Greek sea god of many forms. The protean self, in contrast to the fundamentalist or cult self, is open and many-sided, rather than narrowly prescribed. It calls forth odd combinations and includes elements of humor and mockery. The protean self is not without its difficulties in its constant quest for an ethical core. But it has the virtue of avoiding absolutes and dead ends and holding out an ever present possibility of transformation and change. Indeed, I believe this pattern of proteanism to be a primary response to our present historical situation. Tendencies toward fundamentalism and cult formation are best understood as reactions against proteanism. These reactions can be fierce, as we know. But it's also true that even fundamentalists are susceptible to protean tendencies, as recent work at the Center on Violence and Human Survival has shown. That is why people leave cults or cease to be fundamentalists. Since history, like individual life, is forward moving, the returns are never quite in. Much of the unease in our present world has to do with the struggle between protean and fundamentalist tendencies, as epitomized in the bizarre death sentence applied to the writer Salman Rushdie by the Islamic fundamentalist Ayatollah Khomeini. Much that Margaret Thaler Singer writes in Cults in Our Midst echoes this struggle. We do well to learn all we can from her hard-won experience on preserving the freedom of the mind. Robert J. Lifton, John Jay College, City University of New York, New York, New York, January 1995.